Chapter 6, Critical Thinking and Reasoning, for use with the public speaking projects, Public Speaking the Virtual Text. Please note that not all of the information from Chapter 6 will be covered in this tutorial, and there may be one or two items in this tutorial that might be covered slightly different or in a slightly different manner than what is found within the chapter. In public speaking, when we talk about critical thinking, especially as an audience member, we start with critical listening. We first listen to what the speaker has to say, and then after the speech is done, we use critical thinking to evaluate and analyze the information that the speaker has presented. And then we can decide or determine for ourselves whether we consider that person as a credible speaker or as a competent speaker, and so forth. Also, we use critical thinking skills in our daily lives. Some days we might make more important decisions than others, but we're using these skills every day to decide what is the best course of action to take. There are certain traits that come along with critical thinking. So if you're an audience member listening to the speaker, of course it's important to listen with an open mind and not judge what the speaker has to say until after the speech is done. So you can then carefully analyze what they have said and make important decisions. So you can evaluate the situation, and then after you've evaluated the situation, you can then explain your conclusion if you were to provide feedback to the speaker after the speech is done. And then you can also take into account any biases that you may have. You might have a different perspective or maybe a similar perspective to what the speaker has discussed in their presentation, but it's important to be aware of your biases because they can potentially influence the way that you think about the material covered in the presentation. You can use logic to try to encourage your audience to more fully believe your message. One way in which you can do this is by using a deductive argument. A deductive argument is when you use the truth of a general statement, or a general statement is true, and then you therefore draw a conclusion on it that's more specific than the general statement. So you're going from the broad to the specific. You're using a general statement of fact to go to a more specific statement of fact, if you will. Inductive arguments or inductive reasoning kind of works in the opposite direction. You're using a specific example or a specific instance to draw a more broad or a more general conclusion. So in deductive arguments, you're going from the broad to the specific, or from the more general to the more specific. In inductive reasoning, inductive arguments, you're going from the specific to the more general or to the more broad. It's important to watch out for using fallacies in your presentation. Fallacies are basically errors in reasoning. A formal fallacy is an error in the structure of the speaker's argument, or in other words, the speaker's conclusion doesn't follow its premise. And an informal fallacy is an error in the premise of the speaker's argument. An informal fallacy occurs when the speaker's premise fails to provide an adequate reasoning for the believability of the truth of the conclusion. In the image on the slide, you'll see somebody jumping off a bridge. This is kind of a visual image of a representation of a fallacy. When I was younger, my dad always used to say, if everyone else was jumping off a bridge, would you jump off the bridge too? So that's an example of the bandwagon fallacy. For more information on fallacies, please visit the Public Speaking Project's tutorial on avoiding reasoning fallacies at www.publicspeakingproject.org/videomodules.html. The Public Speaking Project's textbook, Public Speaking the Virtual Text, can be found at www.publicspeakingproject.org.